So thanks everybody for joining us for today's webinar. Topic for today is understanding state-of-the-art cyber threats and optimizing your budget for cyber defense. We're really excited to be joined by Dr. Dawn Dunkerley today. Dr. Dunkerley is Edge's lead virtual chief information security officer, and heads up our cybersecurity efforts with members across the spectrum, whether that be higher ed, K-12, government, healthcare, and all across the board. So we're really excited to dig into today's session. Before we get going with the meat of the content for today, I just want to take a minute or two to introduce folks to Edge in a bit more detail if you don't know us so well. Edge is a nonprofit, member-based research and education network and a technology consortium. We were formed by the New Jersey President's Council for Higher Education back around the turn of the century. The presidents of all the higher ed institutions in the state got together and I think pretty wisely realized that the internet wasn't going anywhere and was going to have a really big role to play in education moving forward. And they built Edge in that atmosphere to serve as a service provider and as an advocate for the success of the higher education institutions in that digital world. In the time since then, we've really grown to serve a much wider community, including higher ed, of course, and the research efforts of higher education, but K-12 districts, state and local government entities, libraries, healthcare organizations and institutions, and other nonprofit organizations as well. Initially, what Edge was formed to do was to build a network around the state. So we still own and operate an optical fiber network around the state of New Jersey, which now has grown regionally. We've turned on our first connected members in New York and Pennsylvania. We have connectivity down to Ashburn, Virginia on the network. So that network is continuing to grow and mature and really is a world-class network built for, the highest level research, as well as the needs of, school districts and government entities as well. Edge Discovery is our research arm under Edge and EdgeNet. Technology-based research and discovery framework. We also work to support grant-funded research activity and high-performance computing in that space. Edge Market is our strategic and informed consortium procurement arm. We operate a co-op on behalf of our members, and that's, again, not only the higher ed institutions and not only institutions and entities in New Jersey, but folks all across the country from the public sector and private education institutions can take advantage of the contracts generated out of Edge Market. We do events, networking, and community building, just like what we're doing here today. And then we really try and lead the way for our members on thought leadership and solution development in areas where folks are under-resourced, understaffed, where the changes and the dynamics in the technology landscape really put the public sector and put education institutions on the back foot at times. Edge can come in and help to support the efforts of our members in those spaces. So big picture digital transformation, how do we orient our institutions and organizations towards success in the new digital world? Cloud strategy, really trying to figure out how do we take advantage of migrating to the cloud, multi-cloud approach, and find the right fit and a budget and a cost that works in the cloud as well. Digital teaching and learning is so important now as students' expectations change during the pandemic. Digital learning has to be infused into everything that we do, whether that's fully online or digital in the classroom and leveraging various tools. And then cybersecurity, privacy, and compliance is so key to the way all of our member institutions have to approach their technology landscape today. And we really do a lot of work to support the cybersecurity and health of our institutions in that space. So with that, I'll stop sharing my screen and I will invite Dr. Dunkerley to jump in for the bulk of today's content.
Thank you very much, Adam. I appreciate that. So I'm going to share my screen and let me know when you see it.
Got it.
All right, awesome. So I just happened to look at the participants and I see some folks who might be kind of new to me, so I will give you a little bit of my background. So I spent the better part of 20 years supporting the U.S. Department of Defense, primarily the Army, in cybersecurity and cyber intelligence. My background from an academic perspective is cybersecurity. I have a PhD in information systems focused in actually cybersecurity metrics within organizations. So kind of stuff that we think about, in our everyday lives quite often now. So pleasure to meet all of you. If I haven't met you before, welcome. And we're just gonna run through some slides and talk about a few things. I wanted to make sure to leave plenty of time for discussion at the end. So if you have any questions or comments, as best as I can help you out with them, please do feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll make sure to get you some time after the slide deck to discuss those. So, understanding state of the art cyber threats and optimizing your budget to defend against them. So, kind of very relevant topics these days. So, understanding the cybersecurity landscape. So, I'm sure all of you are no strangers to the different events that are going on right now within the cybersecurity space and the attack space. We'll go into a deep dive specifically on MOVEit shortly. But cyber attacks are becoming increasingly sophisticated. When we started back in the what was before it was even called cybersecurity, when I was working for the federal government, obviously we were always the target of different attacks for various reasons, whether it ends up being the script kiddies, as they're called, that are just wanting to look cool and do attacks that may be less sophisticated, to your attackers that are hacktivists, basically. So basically, activists trying to make a point. Your commercial hackers trying to make money, and obviously your nation state level attackers who are trying to do a variety of things, whether it's embed themselves into your critical infrastructure, or gain access to sensitive data. So we've seen all of these things going on for years and years, and I'm sure you are aware of that as well. We definitely are seeing an uptick over the last few years. Last year, I believe they said that education was the #1 target for most ransomware. We obviously have had lots of stories about that. And then obviously local governments are getting hit this year pretty hard as well. And our educational institutions, especially higher ed, have research projects going on with the government, research studies going on that different people would like to gain access to, as well as just holding you for ransom. It's a double pronged approach at this point in time, where ransomware is not just a ransom; it's also a data breach associated with it generally. And definitely, we'll talk about the repercussions of that shortly. So, information and systems, to a point that Adam kind of made about digital and the uptick in digital systems within education, and the requirement to have them up and running. They're more critical than ever in the education sector. I have a 15-year-old high school sophomore right now, and the thought of them having a day without systems up and running is kind of preposterous, whether he needs to have access to it at home to do his work or at school. In fact, he's on the school's esports team, and so he plays video games during the school day as a class. So we're more reliant than ever on systems being available and being secure, and then proactive measures. So we're going to talk about what does that look like, but understanding that things are getting tougher. They were already tough, getting tougher on a daily basis for CIOs and CISOs and IT managers and directors. And budgets aren't getting bigger generally, but we're also more reliant on that information system and the data associated with it. So what does that look like, and how do we take proactive measures in a prioritized approach? Okay, so emergence of new age cyber threats. In part of that landscape and part of the way that it's changing on a daily basis. Artificial intelligence. Everybody's probably heard of Chat GPT and different AI tools that definitely provide us a lot of opportunities to streamline and take advantage of that automated and artificial intelligence, but also creates a lot of opportunities for cybercrime and people who use them to attack us. So cyber criminals are increasingly using AI-powered phishing attacks. So if you think about years back, where we would have emails that would come in, and it was easy to spot, right? You're looking for the poorly worded email, poor spelling, things that seem laughable. It's easy to spot. It's easy for our traditional tools to spot as well. Cyber criminals are now using things like ChatGPT to create much more sophisticated attacks. For example, not only just creating an email that is well worded and makes sense. They are also beginning to try at a minimum to use these tools to create malware and code that is malicious in nature to try to attack those networks. So it really is bringing, just as AI will bring opportunities to us for on a lot of different fronts. It also is bringing a lot of opportunity for attackers as well. And then deep fakes. This is really, really fascinating to me. How easy the same kind of artificial intelligence and machine learning is able to create videos that are fake, based on pictures, real people creating videos and different situations that are completely obviously manipulated and false. So it does create opportunities as well for malicious individuals to be able to take advantage of that. We've actually started to see some deep fake voice recognition issues. So people are creating voices and attempting to gain access to organizations based on fake voices. So not only does that we have the fraud and misinformation, identity theft, and political manipulation as we talk here, but if we have technologies that are reliant on voice, we have a situation there where we need to be concerned about this technology. So again, we have a lot of opportunity, but also things that we need to be very concerned about, and we need to be protecting against. So we'll talk a little bit about MOVEit. I'm sure everybody here has heard of the MOVEit attack and associated breaches, but just a little bit of a high level background. So back in June, it was announced, and announced is an interesting way of putting it, because the threat actor basically started posting on the dark web that they had compromised hundreds. In fact, the last number I saw on this is 677 organizations so far that have been compromised as a result of MOVEit. So MOVEit is just simply a piece of software that is used for file transfer. So the sad thing is it's supposed to be a secure mechanism, but as I understand it, at this point in time, their source code was compromised by ransomware actor CLOP, CL0P, and they were able to gain access to organizations that were using the client-based version of MOVEit as a result. So that has had really repercussions across a number of industries. But from an education perspective, I really wanted to just highlight these three in particular. So if you're working in higher ed right now, you've probably seen the first one, National Student Clearinghouse. So thousands of student enrollment and other records involved in that. What we're seeing from that right now is kind of two tiers of compromise. So kind of the lower tier is just basic information, about affected students. So maybe student name and other information that's not necessarily as sensitive. And then another tier that is including more personal information like a social security number. And those two different tiers have different levels of reporting requirement. So that is definitely very much a work in progress about contacting affected individuals and making sure that they understand that their information has been compromised, what level of compromise maybe that information was. So still a lot of work going on that front. Definitely, and different higher ed institutions are handling that particular situation differently. National Student Clearinghouse also did stand up a website where they're posting information about kind of the status of what's being done. So that definitely is affecting lots and lots of our higher ed, if not most of our higher ed base with the student information. And as you know, when student information is affected, we have lots of things that we take very seriously about making sure we get the information out. And so we are working diligently with our partners to make sure that everybody who has had information exposed, make sure they know the things that they need to do to protect themselves. TIAA-CREF, if you have worked in higher ed, for sure, you very likely know these folks. I have a savings account, a investment account through TIAA-CREF. So I'm waiting to get my letter as well. But to joke, but to be serious, with my time with the U.S. government, my data has been exposed so many times at this point in time. I'm not sure what else you can find out about me that isn't already there. And I have teenagers, so I don't have any money in my bank account anyway, so it's fine. But they actually just had a class action lawsuit alleging, not only the breach of the personal records, but alleging basically that they didn't take the precautions and conduct the due diligence to make sure that information was protected. So that will be interesting to see how that plays out for sure. Definitely, the information from TIAA, in my opinion, has been kind of less information put out than in the case of the National Student Clearinghouse. So remains to be seen, but we'll be definitely following that one closely. But that just shows you here that a third-party breach, meaning MOVEit, has directly affected their bottom line as well, both from a recovery and notification perspective, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a second, but also, we'll see how this lawsuit plays out, and if they end up paying even more from that perspective. And then PBI research services. So I had actually not heard of PBI research services before this, and as I was, over the last few months doing the research and trying to keep up with who's who in the zoo, as they say, from the breach perspective. PBI stands for Pension Benefit Information, and they are a third-party vendor that was handling a lot of sensitive information. I mean, the name alone, pension benefit information, kind of tells you that they're handling a lot of sensitive information on behalf of different organizations, everything from state and local government to large industry. So they were doing that on their behalf and using MOVEit to move that information around. So I wanted to highlight this because, again, I had never heard of PBI research services. And it just goes to show you how we can be affected so strongly by third parties, sometimes even fourth parties, that are working on our behalf or are contracting, maybe working with somebody that we don't even know about, right? So understanding our vendors and understanding the risk associated with them is becoming increasingly clear that we have to make a real strong push to understand vendor risk and manage that. So impacts on the education sector, and this is a little bit of an eye chart. I apologize, but I know definitely these slides will go out, and I want people to kind of think about it and understand that the cost of recovery and the impacts associated with these events is not just in the moment. So kind of that top left bullet, rebuilding systems and restoring your data. While obviously in the moment, we're in the middle of a breach, we're in the middle of a ransomware attack, that cost comes, quick and heavy. Maybe we have, cyber insurance, hopefully that's helping, helping us bear some of that burden. But we need to understand, not only from maybe we have to get new systems, maybe we have to, be down for some amount of time. We have to think about things like overtime for our personnel, potentially. Some of the organizations right now, definitely the ones that were most heavily impacted by this, are having to stand up call centers to take in phone calls. They're having to stuff envelopes and send out notification letters to people. So there are significant costs, both people, process, and technology, associated with the response and recovery. Legal fees and penalties, especially if you are a public organization and you pay a ransom, not only do you face legal penalty, and different states have different different policies on that. But if you are paying a penalty to a ransomware organization, for example, that is on the list of basically the no-go list for the U.S. government, you are actually breaking federal law as well. So, one thing to bear in mind there as well, we also talked about TIA dealing with a class action lawsuit. So if it turns out that you're not keeping your own house in order and you're not doing your own due diligence, then you face significant penalty. This is a good opportunity for me to give a little bit of a note to everybody on the webinar who is involved with higher education, that if you're not familiar with the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, GLBA, and you have not put the safeguards in place that were put into place officially on June the 9th, you are already at risk of starting the process of losing your ability to process financial aid through the FSA. So I would highly recommend you bear that in mind as well. We've already seen institutions that have gone through an audit and have gotten the nastygram from FSA saying that you're not complying with the new guidelines. So it is being enforced. It is being followed up on. And then there are more requirements coming down the pike. So if anybody wants a bit of light reading, that will surely help if you have insomnia, help with that. Look up NIST, NIST, National Institutes of Standards and Technology, 800-171. So the GLBA requirements right now that have been put in place in June are just the precursor to the requirement for full compliance with 800-171. So just a little bit of a heads up, be proactive. And start thinking about this now rather than later. We don't know a date on that one yet, but it's good to start thinking about it now and start putting the plans into place to get ahead of that coming requirement, because it's not a small one. Lost revenue and enrollment. So obviously, as we talked about previously, systems are more important to our educational environment than ever. So I live in Huntsville, Alabama, actually, if you didn't catch the accent. And our systems in the Huntsville city schools were down for 2 weeks. And it was right during the middle of COVID. and they had to actually roll back to paper, and parents had to go by during the middle, again, COVID protocols, and pick up paper copies of everything for students to be able to do their work. So do we have the process in place now to do that? And what impact does that have on the students as well, and faculty and staff? So reputational damage kind of goes along with that as well. As people are making choices to choose different institutions, um, you know, if they've had a major cyber issue, they've lost a lot of student information. They suffer a reputational damage, which is very hard to quantify, but it is there. And at this point in time, where different institutions are definitely more cognizant than ever of making sure that they keep those enrollment numbers up, we need all the help we can get, and certainly having a breach of student data that is our fault can in fact impact that enrollment number. Impact on learning. Obviously, we talked about disruption to classes, potentially causing students to fall behind, compromise student data. So it definitely remains to be seen, but this data getting out onto the dark web, which is where it generally goes, and is very often sold to the highest bidder, can directly lead to identity theft and other violations. Obviously, that's one reason why, in a lot of cases, that we end up with credit monitoring, for some period of time, because so often it does get attempted. And then finally, we talked about the good research that's being done at our higher ed institutions, and these attacks can cause significant disruption, or quite frankly, that information can be stolen and used elsewhere. Especially if you are doing research on behalf of the federal government, a lot of those contracts that are coming through that are with associated funding does come now with a increased cybersecurity requirement. So making sure that you're doing the things that need to be done to protect that important research and progress. So optimizing your cyber defense. So let's talk about, we talked about all the yucky, scary stuff. Let's talk about how do we improve ourselves. So understanding the importance of cyber defense. And I'm not probably telling you anything that you don't know, because you went to the trouble of signing up for this webinar and showing up and listening. So you know how important this is, but sometimes maybe your leadership doesn't. And this is where I want to say cybersecurity is not where we should be, cutting corners. So GOBA is a great example of that. If we don't stay compliant with GOBA, strike one is after the audit, and they find that you are not compliant, they will give you a set point of amount of time to create what they call a corrective action plan that says, I will be compliant with these missing requirements by X date, and here's the plan to do that. And if they go back and find that you did not do what you said you were going to do, and you're still not in compliance, and they have the ability to pull your ability to process financial aid, like I said previously. So for higher ed, that is disastrous. How do we afford to run an institution without financial aid? Obviously, that's just one consequence, but that tends to be one that's very near and dear to our hearts. So maybe helping leadership understand, that importance, and we're not just out here asking for money because we are trying to be difficult, but we want to spend some money to save some money. And part of that spending some money to save some money is identifying the required resources. So we're going to talk a little bit here shortly about what prioritized choices might look like, but having a firm understanding, having a strong assessment of what we need to do, and the work plan associated with that. So what are the actions we need to take to meet best practice? The 800-171 is a great example of of a framework that you could use to say, you know, where am I at from this perspective? Where do I need to be? And then work out from there. And so we're actually working with a lot of our schools right now to begin very proactively start understanding where do we need to be in compliance with that, and let's start thinking about identifying the budgetary needs associated with that, and then prioritizing that spending. So as everybody knows, there's a lot of nice to haves and some must haves. So identifying those must haves, whether it's people, process, and technology. So we talk about firewall enhancements, obviously making sure we can, you know, get the best thing that we have from a hardware perspective on our perimeter, but also making sure it's tuned properly and configured appropriately. User training and education. So how do we improve that that training and awareness for the users so that we improve general user behaviors? And then when general user behaviors or something else fails, how do we identify that something has happened, and then react, recover appropriately? So having that incident response team, making sure that we have a plan and making sure we're testing it appropriately, are key as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about examples of investing in cyber defense. So different higher ed organizations that are doing kind of, you know, walking the walk, as they say. So starting up with Indiana University, some of you may have heard of something called the OmniSOC, but the OmniSOC is a Big Ten security operations center. So, but it started, I believe it's hosted out of Indiana actually also. Security operations centers help sort of bolster your defenses and make sure you have trained eyes on monitoring potential threats in real time. So people who have access to information, threat intelligence, systems that can monitor everything from logs to net flow, making sure that we get that early detection ahead of the game. So so that's just one example of, you know, again, they didn't necessarily have a security operations center that they wanted to invest in, so they did it themselves and stood one up. And a kind of a like in kind organization, Carnegie Mellon. Carnegie Mellon is actually legendary in the cybersecurity field, one of the first universities before it was even called cybersecurity, that was definitely a pioneer in the field. So they have one of the world-class certs, so computer emergency response team, and they work. Their cert works with, you know, federal governments and definitely, you know, academia, but also commercial. They're kind of one of the long-standing certs within the U.S. But the university itself partnered with their own certs, so they have this world-class talent. Let's make sure that we're using it to protect ourselves. And that's actually one of the things that some of the schools that we're working with right now are looking between partnerships with maybe their cybersecurity program. We've got great people doing great work in cybersecurity across our academic environments. How can we help use that talent pool to help protect us as well? So, so that's definitely what Carnegie Mellon has been doing. University of California, San Diego. So we talk about training and awareness, and they have, you know, gone through the process of creating lots of, you know, short training and awareness programs to make sure that they promote that culture of cyber awareness. So one of the things, and it is a, not only is it a requirement for GLBA to make sure that people who are handling financial information are taking the proper training and awareness measures at least annually. It's just a good idea to increase good user behaviors and help our entire user community understand the roles and responsibilities they have for the culture, for the entirety of our population. So creating that culture of awareness. To do that, just so you know, with a lot of the folks we work with from a virtual chief information security officer perspective, we do a lot of training and awareness programs. We everything from the online kind of your know-befores and different options like that. Phishing programs so that you kind of have that spot training. But we also do webinars, kind of like this, but we do them and make them open to the student community. I've had the good fortune to be able to go on campus and actually give talks to the faculty, staff, and students. So just coming up with kind of a robust, comprehensive program that has lots of different measures to meet people where they learn the best, to again create that culture of cyber awareness. So I really think the University of Michigan, and I will tell you, my husband has a PhD from Ohio State, so he would abhor hearing me say something nice about the University of Michigan. But if you haven't been on their cybersecurity site, they have one of the best ones I've seen as far as just kind of discussion and robust, like these are the measures we take and this is what we hold our faculty and staff and our own systems accountable to. So I really admire them for that. And I loved this, their CLAP framework. So understanding what systems we have, so doing just a basic inventory of what information technology do we have, and where is our critical data actually residing. So doing data classification, and that's a fundamental step for so many things, from understanding what we should patch first, maybe, to what do we need to encrypt to different levels. It's absolutely seminal control in and of itself. But they knew, as we all do here as well, we have to do things on a prioritized manner. So they have this CLAP framework that they have prioritized their activities. So configuration management, making sure that the systems that critical data are housed on, that those are hardened, that we have hardened baselines built on best practices. Logging, so making sure that we have the logging appropriately associated with that, and that we're actually able to see, maybe not only when people didn't get access, right? So you're denied access, but also making sure that we can see when somebody did get access that we maybe they ought not to have. And an associated maybe a SIEM system like a Splunk or something like that behind the scenes as well, making sure people are alerted, but making sure you have that logging turned on so we can actually go back and do review if need be, or get that real-time understanding as well. Access and accounts, making sure that we follow that principle of least privilege, and making sure that when people are onboarded and offboarded, that processes are followed associated with that. And then fundamentally, you're patching. So making sure that, again, you're patching your most critical systems first, and then following the best practice kind of guidelines associated with patching. If you have a Microsoft environment, you're definitely familiar with Patch Tuesday. Chrome is becoming just I think Chrome updates now on an almost daily basis, it seems like, for me. But we only have so many people and so much time, and doesn't seem to be a lot of money. So this CLAP framework is the way that they've gone about that. I think that's pretty cool, and it's a great acronym too. And then Georgia State. So in Invested, we talked a little bit previously about intrusion detection systems, but they were able to actually implement something to get ahead of these activities. So we see something that is potentially malicious. What we're trying to do is, incidents are going to occur, but we definitely want to identify those things early enough that we can reduce the potential impact. So if we think about a ransomware situation, these systems maybe see, hey, NetFlow, we're talking out to countries or known bad nation state actors, or even criminal actors. We're talking out to known bad actors. We shouldn't be. We need to investigate this now and try to get ahead of a potential incident, because again, very often right now in the ransomware situation, what we're seeing is the data breach is happening weeks or months ahead of time before the execution of that event. So we have some opportunities, if we have the right systems and have the right people who are looking for these activities, to try to get ahead of maybe that that ransomware execution event and mitigate hopefully some of the data breach as well. So quick wins. We talked about a lot of these already, but risk and vulnerability assessments. Again, I think all of these, except for maybe the invest in advanced tools, are seminal requirements now for GLBA. So understanding your risk and vulnerabilities. So starting with a comprehensive assessment. Do we know what the top risks to our institution are? From a confidentiality, integrity, and availability perspective, we need to know what the impacts are associated with that. And then vulnerability assessment. And it's not just a vulnerability scan, but it's understanding more kind of in totality about what are we vulnerable to. That can include physical security, as an example. So there's more than just maybe running a scan and saying, okay, I know my vulnerability, we're good. We need to understand much more kind of comprehensively what is the vulnerability associated, and those two go hand in hand definitely. So understanding what the risks are, what are our threats, and what are the impacts associated with those, and then the kind of vulnerability to those things. Incident response planning. We need to have an incident response plan, but it does not need to just sit on a shelf and gather dust. We need to be able to test it regularly. So we definitely recommend at a minimum annually. That's kind of the minimum requirement. But we recommend that happen at least every 6 months. And this is a good opportunity to say also, incident response teams are not just the IT staff. And this is something that I think has surprised a lot of the organizations that we've worked with who are having a kind of a ransomware incident or just another type of negative security incident. Once we start dealing with the insurance company, very often the IT staff is not the person who has been dealing with the insurance provider. So we need to make sure that kind of point of contact is involved as well, because they'll kind of be the liaison to the insurance company. If communications need to go out both internally to maybe faculty, staff, and students, as well as externally out to other organizations, there's going to be a communications aspect. There's also going to be a legal aspect. So the incident response team needs to be bigger than just, okay, it's the IT manager, the CIO, and a few people on the team who are going to be doing the response and recovery. While they have obviously a hugely critical role in this, it's going to be a much more comprehensive group of people who need to understand what is their role and responsibility. Third-party risk. So we just talked about MOVEit. So how many kind of organizations thought about their third-party risk? I'm betting a lot of the organizations that were compromised didn't even know who MOVEit was. So one of the things we really stress and we work a lot on here with kind of the Edge team is monitoring our third-party risks. So understanding who your critical vendors are, understanding who has access into your network, understanding what your critical software is, student information systems, learning management systems, ERPs, critical infrastructure. So do you have HVAC on your network, for example? So understanding the third-party risk, and one of the things we're really recommending is a vendor risk management program where we vet vendors before they come onto the network. We vet them at least annually using a variety of tools. And we definitely on at least a weekly basis have phone calls with vendors saying, hey, your software, your security posture, we don't find it appropriate for our security. We're trying to strengthen our security, not decrease it because we have insecure software, insecure processes. And so we're taking that very seriously and really do recommend that you do that as well. Hold them accountable. Make understand there's a business need for a lot of things. And sometimes we have to accept the risk, But then in that case, let's have a program in place to monitor those vendors and understand that risk. So really recommend that be something that you focus on if you're not already. And then investing in advanced tools. So we talked about the kind of the things that we're concerned about with AI in the future, but we also have the ability to use some of those capabilities for good. So, for example, some of the new EDR tools from the big name vendors are starting to use a lot of AI to do threat intelligence to help again be a much more real time understanding using machine learning and otherwise to parse through information and help you make decisions faster. Maybe help you kill suspicious or compromised communications in a much more real time manner. So you know, look at your vendors, from EDR, different tools that you have, and see if they're kind of embracing these emerging technologies for your good. Okay, so my last slide, we talked about kind of the threats. We talked about MOVEit, which is definitely something that we're all going to have to keep a close eye on into the future for sure. 677 organizations and counting, and we'll see how many more of them directly affect us in our everyday lives. We talked about some defense strategies. Listen, none of those things probably surprised you, but sometimes the best practices are the best practice for a reason. We do appreciate you being here. Again, you made an investment in your time to come here, and that means you're already ahead of the game, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate your time. And obviously, you have Adam's information, you got Edge's information. If you have any questions or comments or want to follow up on any of this stuff in the future, you're always welcome to reach out. Glad to have a phone call with you. Glad to have a Zoom with you. Talk about how we can help and try to help you all stay safe. So I will stop, and Adam, if we have any questions.
Yeah, I did have a couple come in, so we'll grab those now. So one is kind of tactical on the MOVEit hack. How do we know if vendors that we use might have been exposed to MOVEit? But I guess if the vendors use MOVEit, is there an easy way to find that stuff out at this point?
So at this point in time, we're starting to see notifications come out. So National Student Clearinghouse was an example of that. So they basically have started sending emails out to affected institutions saying, your institution was affected. Here's how you gain access to the affected accounts associated with that. There are some different websites that have, compiled various lists of those. They're trying to keep up with them, but at this point in time, your vendor should be reaching out to you, if not already, very shortly, to try to let you know. We have some tools that we monitor the dark web for, and so I'm basically watching the threat actors website just to see who all is who all has showed up on their website, which is terrible but fascinating.
Yeah, probably that slow real time trickle is probably interesting to see.
I hold my breath every morning, waiting to see who, hoping I don't recognize anybody.
Have any of our members asked us to help them reach out proactively to any vendors just to see, any high profile vendors maybe that they're worried might be a part of it, or is it just kind of wait and see mode at this point?
Not really reaching out so much. I'll be honest with you. Some of the vendors have denied that they were affected until they suddenly were affected. So we haven't really been reaching out necessarily to major vendors, but we certainly have had vendors say, no, we're not affected. Oh yeah, we are. So that's really more how it's going at this point in time. And a lot of the activity right now is again going on to understand who was affected, what information was affected associated with those people, and what is the reporting requirement associated with that. Because again, knock wood, most of the organizations that we've worked with, at least, have not been directly affected. But that might be, at that second, third, fourth party effect. So a lot of it at this point in time has sadly been wait and see.
Yep. Okay. Another one, like, since this was a 0-day attack, how much can we really do to prevent this from happening to our vendors? What can members do proactively, I guess, to
Mhm.
to stay ahead of that, being that it was a 0-day and maybe nobody knew that it was really sitting there?
That's tough. So we do have some tools. Again, we talked about vendor risk management. So again, if I'm using maybe one, a student information system, understanding, what is their security posture through a variety of tools. We can see kind of what they look like from a perimeter perspective. If anybody on the call is familiar with the EDUCAUSE HECVAT, that's a great tool to try to have them fill out. It's a questionnaire, so it's only as good as the answers they give, but help understand a little bit better about how they store and process the information. But we do have some tools that allow us to have some visibility into what our vendors, what are they using. So not necessarily that would have 100% caught this particular situation, but it's good to know what vendors are they using. So if we end up with a situation where one of our vendors is compromised through that other party, we can at least maybe have a little bit more visibility into that as well. Again, we're doing all of this from a perimeter perspective, so it doing the best we can, but really we are trying to understand and hold vendors accountable based on kind of a variety of policies putting into place that we want to know what you're doing with our data. We want to know kind of what tools you're using, and we are going to make choices whether we use or don't use your systems and software.
Yeah. Okay. Well, another one here related to the deep fake piece. So you mentioned emerging threats like deep fakes. What can we do to prevent those kinds of threats apart from education of team members?
At this point in time, I would say education is about the best we can do. It's just and that's I mean that's a tough one. We're seeing deep fake video and voice, especially, just really take off and be very compelling. And so just understanding that it's out there, and sometimes everything you see and hear is not necessarily what you thought it was, which is good, kind of good to remember in any context, right?
Yeah. Have you seen any of the security training vendors integrate any of that kind of thing into their programs yet? Or are they still sort of more ransomware focused?
Not really as much. No, not from an AI. I'm sure they will.
Yeah.
Most of the training programs for 2023 go, they're released in 2022, for example. So things are changing so rapidly. We haven't necessarily seen a lot of this, or at least I haven't seen a lot of this be updated yet, but it will. What we're focusing on a lot in the training programs are the understanding what a phishing, looking for phishing emails, because people are still falling prey to that. So we've got to get those activities right. Understanding what good user behaviors look like, understanding your roles and responsibilities, understanding the threat associated with your institution. So honestly, just the basics are still what we're training on a lot, because quite frankly they're still extremely valid, and in a lot of cases not being followed.
Okay. And then one more. This is one that I'm sort of interested in, related to the budget side of cybersecurity and related to the cost of recovery. Because I was reading, as I pulled together our newsletters, I'm always kind of keeping an eye on what's happening out there across higher education. And there was a survey by one of the cybersecurity vendors. I forget who now off the top of my head. I'll find it and try and send the link to everybody. But it highlighted that more than 50% of higher education institutions that get hit with ransomware end up actually paying the ransom.
Mhm.
And very often that's effective. They get their data back, and it's not, you know, continued to be breached. But that the cost of recovery, even for folks who do pay the ransom, is
Mhm.
typically much lower, and, you know, percentage, you know, degrees lower, when they have, you know, prior disaster recovery, you know, plans and things in place. So even if they pay the ransom, having the recovery in place ends up saving them a ton of money. So in the budgeting priorities, I mean, have you seen that as sort of a trend with
So
members of
first of all,
the
we would never ever recommend
yeah,
to pay that the ransom. Period. First of
right.
all, it's just it's a wrong thing to do for a variety of reasons. But we are when we pay ransom, we are incentivizing the threat actor. But that being said, absolutely, and we've dealt with a number of incidents that we've with our partners, and um, preparation. What is it? An ounce of preparation is worth a pound of cure, and that's very true. So investing in things like immutable backup systems, investing in those systems that will help detect something ahead of time. Absolutely, absolutely. We investing in relationships with security operations centers, for example, even people like the multi-state ISAC. If anybody on the Zoom is familiar with them, we've had them give us proactive warning ahead of time of incidents that were about to take place. So, absolutely, we've seen people be able to get out ahead of things, and maybe they lost some data, but they were able to keep the systems up and running. Even so definitely that ounce of prevention pays those dividends for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard you say so many times that, you know, best practice is absolutely not to pay the ransom, and we never recommend that. That I was surprised to see those kinds of percentages, and over half of institutions actually paying it. But
Yeah, and the problem with ransomware, like I mentioned a couple of times already, the major threat actors now are definitely breaching your data ahead of time and then attempting the ransom. They're kind of so you're getting hit with the 1-2 punch.
yeah,
So I hate to see anybody pay the ransom. I recognize why some people do, but definitely trying to think through what can we invest in now that we don't have to invest that money later in sending it to a threat actor.
yeah. Cool. Okay, so I think that's all we have. Of course, folks, you know, again, thanks for joining us. And if you do have any other questions for Dawn coming out of this session, you know, please send them over. We're always happy to follow up and have those conversations offline too, because we know some of this stuff can be quite sensitive. So, you know, feel free to follow up with Dawn or myself, and we'll be able to make that happen. So, thanks again so much for the time. Thanks, Dawn. This was another really good session. Looking forward to seeing everybody again soon. Oh, and hopefully we'll see you. I'll make a quick plug. Hopefully we'll see you at EdgeCon in November. We'll be out there out at Kean University on November 2nd. You can find out more information about EdgeCon on our website and register there as well. So hopefully we'll see you there, and Dawn will be there, and I'm sure we'll have a session or two on the schedule. So we're looking forward to it. So hopefully we'll see you all there.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.